is all about collaboration. Obviously, in this class, because it is an online course, you pretty much are a one woman or a one man show. Unfortunately, I hate that you guys are siloed and kind of all by yourselves, but maybe that this is kind of like how you prefer to work, or maybe it's just this is the kind of time that you had this semester. So I assume that you picked this because it works best for you. But usually in the business world, we do work as teams with other people, unless you have your own business or you're a one woman or a one man team. So, we're going to be talking a little bit about how to collaborate together with other people, specifically how to write with other people, which I think is a very difficult process, regardless of how good of a writer you are. So, we're going to talk about some advantages and disadvantages of collaborative writing. We're also going to be talking just about like what are the advantages or functions of a collaborative writing team. It's almost impossible to talk about working with others without talking about the nature of conflict and groupthink as well as cohesiveness and how those two issues are connected. If you've had a small group communication class, a lot of these concepts will probably be review for you. If you haven't, they may be new. If something that I'm talking about during this lecture is confusing or doesn't make sense, please send me an email or text me or call me and I can describe it more. I used to teach small group communication as an entire class, so I do know a fair amount about it. And I've worked on a team before when I used to be a drug and alcohol counselor. So I have some experience working in teams, at least in the therapy realm. So, we're also going to be talking about how you lead a collaborative writing team if leadership is something that you're interested in, and then how do you go about working with other departments. So, say that maybe you're marketing and you're trying to work with the finance department. Okay, so typically this is where I would ask the class, well, why would we even want to work with other people? Why wouldn't we just stay in our own little silo and kind of do our own thing? Generally, we work or write with others because we need subject areas in other places. So I've said before, I don't need another me. I already have me. I need somebody who knows something in a different area. So um, if you do PR really well, but maybe you struggle a little bit with budgets, you would seek that person out. The project obviously benefits from having a different perspective, and then it all kind of looks as one unified version of that. And I think I've found, even as I'm getting older, that I kind of have people in my life that I know are good at certain things, and I will reach out to them. And say, hey, can you help me with this or can you help me with that? And they kind of become your connected network and your colleagues and people that you turn to, which formally is is sometimes LinkedIn, which again, I will encourage you, if you haven't done so already, please make a LinkedIn profile, start to make those connections. Hopefully the career report that you're probably working on at this point will help you form a potential mentor relationship with someone, or help you collaborate with somebody. I posted an article this week about mentorship. I do think that mentorship is hugely important to your success, to your career success, and it's definitely benefited me as I've kind of altered and changed in the different career paths that I've taken. Sometimes the size and time constraints or the importance of the project necessitates a team. So sometimes things are just too large for one person to do by themselves. When I worked at Miami, we were trying to figure out how to revamp our public speaking class, and we wanted to look at how other schools taught public speaking, and it was just too much to take on. So my supervisor kind of assigned me a role and she assigned everybody else a role, and a lot of it was research based, and we kind of divvied up the task and then attacked it, right, and took it on. And so sometimes that is the case where many minds are better than one. Which is kind of the next thing that we're talking about, the idea of the advantages of collaboration. You also have feedback right away. So instead of sometimes waiting for an instructor or a supervisor or somebody else to get back to you, you have your teammate right there that can tell you instantly what they think about your writing or about your work. What's also nice is that team member can play the devil's advocate. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? They also help you with just the general frustration and stress of writing. It can be very frustrating, especially for those that are science minded or math minded, and this doesn't come to you easy or it's not something that you enjoy. Sure, I've had my fair share of English students that love writing. I've also had engineering students that were like, I hate this. This is not what I enjoy. This is not my cup of tea. And so having somebody on your team that you can joke around with or just have a good time, it makes the process of something you don't enjoy doing better. Um, it's kind of like working out. Not everyone enjoys it, but it's necessary. It's like a necessary evil. Okay. It also gives you more confidence with your writing. I have my husband look at all my stuff because he's good with grammar. And many people laugh at me about this, but I'm not a very good speller, and I'm not exactly a grammar genius. It's taken me a long time to get to the level I am with writing. I used to really struggle with writing, and I've been to a lot of writing centers, and I've read a lot of books about writing, and I've had a lot of practice with writing with my undergraduate and my 2 master's degrees. And it really is just about practice and having people look at your work, and it's all about time. Or if you think about how time is spelled, time, it stands for things I must earn time. So just that practice and having somebody else look at your stuff. And when you have a team, you have multiple people looking at your stuff, which is great. More tolerance and respect of opinions of others. Going back to this idea of feedback, it's not always easy to hear feedback, but I think if you are on this loop of feedback where it's something you're kind of prepared for and you're used to, kind of wears you down, it gets you more used to it. It gives you access to resources. It's that whole who do you know and what do they have access to. Everybody knows somebody that does something or can get you in somewhere, and that's great. And feelings of inclusion, being a part of a team, feeling like you belong. This is very common in sororities and fraternities on campus, or even nonprofit organizations that you may be a part of, or service organizations. It's just this feeling of something larger, that you're a part of something bigger. Okay, now, yes, this is all wonderful. This is all rose-colored glasses and all of these things. Yes, there are some disadvantages. It takes some time. It's harder to write a document with a bunch of people. It's harder to work with a bunch of people than just to do it on your own. That's why when students see that they have to write a document together, you get the groans and the moans and just the and also it's an ego thing. Having somebody else evaluate your work is not always enjoyable, and there will be conflict. Some conflict is good. Some conflict is not productive. What we're going to talk about here in a little bit is the Tuckman's stages of group development. And his theory was a group can't be effective if they don't have some kind of conflict. I used to teach a interpersonal communication class, and one of my students said, me and my boyfriend, we've never ever had a fight. And that's not a good thing. I mean, like, every relationship needs a little bit of conflict in order for it to grow and develop and get better and learn. So we're going to talk here in a minute about how sometimes while conflict is uncomfortable, it can serve a purpose if we allow it. There's also the issue of social loafing. Social loafing is a term that you may not be familiar with, but basically it just means someone not pulling their weight. We've probably all had an experience where we've worked in a group where someone just didn't do what they were assigned. Maybe they didn't show up. Maybe they didn't do anything at all. And people have varying reasons for that. Maybe they're having a hard semester. Maybe they had a personal crisis. Sometimes what you expect is not what somebody else thinks is appropriate. I remember I had this one, I think it was in my communication research class, where I was with 2 other peers, both men, and one partner worked really hard and I felt like he did a good job, and the other person in the group just didn't really seem to care. He just kind of seemed to phone everything in. He was there, but his work was kind of like below average, But maybe to him that was enough. So social loafing, I think, it's different things to different people, because I think that different people have different standards for what's acceptable. I tend to have pretty high expectations for what kind of work you should be turning in as a group member. And that's because I tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist. And I think there's probably other people out there that are similar. So I think that working in groups has its own kind of issues, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay, the second issue here, in addition to, okay, dealing with, okay, my time's gone and my energy and my ego, and dealing with conflict and social loafing, another kind of new term is group hate. And then you may think, well, okay, you've got a spelling error on the slide there, Elizabeth. Actually, that's one word. It's a small group term, and it's literally exactly what it sounds like. It's people who hate being in groups. And this was me to a T in college. I hated being in groups because I always ended up having to do all the work. And a little bit of that was because I was over functioning. I was doing all the work and I didn't have to. But some of it was literally because I hated being in groups. I just despised it. Again, I think some of it goes back to the culture, right? The American culture of this individualistic. It's my problem and it's my project and I don't want to work with others. And then I started working and doing therapy, and I saw the value of a team. I saw the value of having multiple people to work with. I saw Western PA heal from things like heroin and alcohol, and even kids being addicted to marijuana and healing from that because of a team that I was on. And I saw the power of small group communication. So I just kind of had to be made a believer, I guess, to not hate it so much. I'd be interested to hear what your own stories and issues with group hate are. We can talk more about that later. The last issue on the slide is group typing. Again, not an error, it's one word, small group term, and it's this idea that you tend to make assumptions. So it's kind of like stereotyping, only with groups. So maybe if you thought about librarians as a group of people, and you're like, well, all librarians wear glasses, and all librarians are nerds, and all librarians, are, whatever it is. That's kind of the idea behind that. Only you attach it to a group of people. And I think about this a lot in terms of fraternities and sororities. And on my campus, I know that we had Alpha Phi Omega, which was the fraternity that I was in. It was co-ed, so girls could be in it too. And it was a service fraternity. And it was kind of the fraternity that you went in if you didn't get into anything else. And the thing about this group typing is that once you're a member of this group, people start making assumptions about you. And that can be very positive or very negative. I think how this plays out for us as written professional communication students is we have to decide what kind of memberships we're going to put on our resume. I think whenever we are dental hygienists and we are, members of professional organizations, I think these are safe organizations to put on our resume. I think there are some other ones that maybe be questionable, or you may have to think about whether or not you want to put them on there because of the assumptions that people would make. There was one fraternity at my school, and I'm not gonna list the name because it may also be at Pitt's campus, that had a really bad rap about hazing. And one of the students there actually died. And, it's all about who you kind of connect yourself with. And that's not to say that everyone from that fraternity would do something like that or would do something bad, but it's all about the stereotyping. It's all about the assumptions that are made. It's kind of like I have one of my students at RMU right now that put his date of birth on his resume. And I told him, I said, I don't know if that's a very good idea because people tend to make assumptions about people that are younger, what you're able to do. He also put that he was from Saudi Arabia, and I didn't know if that was a good idea either, just because I know that some people, even though they shouldn't be, are racist. And so maybe he wouldn't get a job because somebody would, they've even had studies where someone's name, because it sounded a certain way, they assumed that it was foreign, and so that they didn't get a job, versus the same information was put with a name with John, and they did get the job. And so these are just things that it's sad that we have to be aware of these things, but in such a competitive world, it's definitely something to think about, and be strategic and look out for ourselves. And group typing and the assumptions that people will make about you, you really can't control them. So I guess be wary of what you put. I can see where putting a fraternity on there could maybe connect you with somebody, and it could be good. I can also see where people could make assumptions about you, and it could be bad. Just something to think about. Okay, functions of the collaborative writing team. These are kind of the things that you do when you are working together. So first off, you got to plan the document. What is that document going to contain? It usually involves, the second step is researching. You can divvy it out, or you can kind of all research and see what you come up with. What duplication, similar articles, or you can assign separate parts. Then you've got writing the draft. You can all write it together. It's a time-consuming process, but it depends on what outcome you want. Or you can say, hey, you go write the methods, or you go write the executive summary, or you handle the reference section. And then, of course, you're looking at the drafts of other people. This, I feel like, is the most helpful part of the collaboration process, because multiple eyes are great. We do not catch our own errors. I've had situations where I've looked at an activity that I wanted to show in class. I swear I looked at it like 15 times, and I missed 4 or 5 different things that other instructors that I had them look at found, or things that my husband found, or things that I found when I looked at it 3 days later. I've heard that if you put it in different colored ink, it helps you find your errors. But still, it's our own stuff. Something about how our brain assumes that it's right. Okay, revising drafts based on team comments. So getting the feedback from our peers and making the appropriate changes. So these are typically the things that you do. Okay, in the planning stage, the assumption here is that we have the same goal and that we're giving tasks that are appropriate for our members. So if we have someone who's math-minded, we're probably giving them the budget. If we have someone who's really good at tight copy, maybe we're giving them the executive summary. So really thinking about what our team has to offer and utilizing their skill set. Establishing a schedule and trying to stick to that. Selecting the publication medium. Is this going to be a brochure? Is this going to be an annual report? Like, what are we trying to put together here? Agree MLA and APA, keeping in mind that everything that the group is doing, it has to be formatted the same. It has to look the same. And then, of course, keeping in mind that we can always collaborate electronically, which is nice, especially with Google Documents. All right, so research and writing. Generally, you want to create a master outline, and keep in mind, of course, that it could alter as information is found. You generally have a first draft, and you want to make sure that you meet those deadlines. You'll find with writing with others, some people see deadlines as very, very strict things that shouldn't be altered, and other people see them as loosey-goosey things that are open for interpretation. So that can be frustrating. And you've also got the cultural aspect too. Some cultures are very much like, if it says it's due this day, it's due this day. Other people are like, dates are movable. All right, reviewing and revision. You always want to kind of try to be sensitive to the author. Now, they don't need to be acting like you see on the bottom it says can't be your baby and you can't be married to it. If you really want a document to be good, if you really want it to be effective, you almost can't have it be your baby or be married to it. You have to separate yourself from it and want it to develop so much that you have to say, okay, for this to improve, I have to let it go. That being said, you can't send somebody feedback and be like, this was crap. This was the worst thing I ever read. There's not one thing that was good about this. Like, you have to provide feedback in a way that we've been talking about all semester. It's got to be balanced. It's got to be timely. It's got to be specific. all these things that we've been talking about. There are cultural differences in terms of how people like to receive feedback. I always, when I sit down with a student for the first time before I provide feedback to them, and I even say on your student information sheet, and we talk about it, the first half of the class, how do you feel about feedback? I want to know if you're someone that's sensitive to that. I like to be in the know about that. I'm someone that I do not like feedback. I'm constantly trying to improve on that. So keeping those things in mind, I think, is helpful. Trying not to let your ego get in the way of good judgment. Not listening or holding on to something just because it was your way versus listening to what somebody else has to say. This is not like your project. Whenever you're working with a team, it represents the whole team. All right, so let's talk a little bit about conflict, and let's take a little bit of a lecture break and watch a clip from